to the Bulwark Substack Live, the first one. Exciting moment. I'm joined by Sarah Longwell, and we're going to discuss the state of the world here for half an hour and not be too depressing, I hope. Sarah, thanks for taking time out on Sunday midday to do this.
That's okay. I was just hanging out in the middle of the Potomac, and I thought it would be good to chat. I'm on a boat, everybody. I'm on a boat in the middle of winter. Hey, this is cool. Our first Substack Live. We haven't really done a ton. We go live a lot, but now we're going to do this on Substack. So I hope people tell us if you like it. All our Bulwark pals.
Absolutely, and I'm looking forward to trying to doing it every week, and. You'll be out gallivanting around on Sundays typically with the kids and Karen and doing things. But when you get to be my age, it's just sitting out here at home, reading, looking at X and Blue Sky and seeing how much one's being attacked these days and so forth. So this is a nice break for me.
You and I are doing not dissimilar things right now. The only difference is that I say, leave me alone periodically to children. I'm trying to read about Elon. I'm trying to read Elon attacking Bill on Twitter. And I don't know, what did you do to get in this guy's crosshairs so quickly? Because this is the second attack this week that's been very directly at you just because of something you posted on Twitter, at least in this one. This case, you were talking about Elon directly. The last time you were making a joke about the deep state, which led everybody into one of these deep conspiracy theories about how you, Bill Kristol, are a deep state operative, funded by USAID. Although between you and Elon, there is one of you funded by USAID who's received money, and it's Elon, not you. But he's after you again today.
Yeah, I'm flattered that he's paying attention to us. So the first one, just to be clear, is I just tweeted to kind of say, the deep state is better than the Trump state. It didn't mention Elon, and it was a pretty innocuous, whatever, generic kind of thing. And yes, but I think the sort of MAGA mob got alerted. They must have alerts for deep state or something, and they decided to go after me, and they rummaged through the public reports, obviously, of our 501c3 and decided that there was this nefarious conspiracy between us and USAID, which you exposed extremely well in the piece you put up at the Bulwark on Thursday or so. That was pretty crazy, right? I mean, that conspiracy. You should explain it for 30 seconds just to give people, because I think it's important to give people a sense of what is going on, how these conspiracies generate themselves and are based on nothing, but thousands, I don't know, millions, thousands, tens of thousands of people sort of get enthusiastic about promoting them.
Yeah, they get sucked into this idea that they've uncovered, and this is at the heart of conspiracies. Is the idea that people have uncovered something nefarious that they are exposing, right? Because that makes them feel powerful. We are bringing sunlight into this nefarious thing that's happening.
Right.
When actually what they're doing is building a big board and connecting a bunch of dots that aren't actually connected to one another because they have a very limited understanding of things like how 990s work or how money moves through organizations. But so in this particular conspiracy theory, it was the idea that USAID gave money to the Rockefeller Foundation, which gave some money to something called the Hopewell Fund, which has given a grant to us in the past. And then you can actually see in one of the ones they did, you can see then we granted that money out to a number of other organizations, right? So because we have a program in our nonprofit that grants money out to pro-democracy organizations. And so a donor gave money into a pooled fund in Hopewell. Hopewell granted some of that money to us. We engaged in the programmatic work that we engage in, the pro-democracy work we engage in. And you can object to that work if you want, but it's pretty straightforward and whatever. But their idea is that somehow all money is fungible. And so if through these, from USAID to Rockefeller Foundation to Hopewell Fund, but the thing that people don't understand is that in these big foundations, right, they must have had some kind of a program that USAID funded, but they also house many, many, many what are called donor-advised funds, where people hold their money there. Donors hold their money. Sometimes they pull it together with other donors, and then they fund various work through them. So when people are like, well, it's all fungible, it's actually not fungible. These are very distinct accounts that are donor-advised, right? Those donors are putting money into something with the direct belief that it's going to go fund something that they wanted to fund. It is not intermingled with whatever the program is they were funding from USAID. And certainly it's not fungible across like 4 different, movements. It's not there. Everybody's like, it's a money laundering operation. It's actually the opposite of that. These are very distinct organizations or funds that are directed by their donors and have donor oversight. And so this idea that it's all just fungible and it's all just moving through to Bill Kristol, insane.
You're almost being too nice to it in a way. I'd say in 2 ways, though, because one, obviously people can believe, there are credulous people who get sucked into conspiracies. That's why conspiracies are so dangerous. I don't believe for a second that the people promoting this, they understand well enough that massive foundations are involved in a million different projects. One of them happened to have been, I don't even know what it was, and maybe it was a year ago, maybe it was 5 years ago, I don't know, with AID, where they funded, I'm making this up, maternal health in Kenya or something, right? And that was one project. 2 or 3 years later, or 6 months later, whatever, they, through a donor advised fund, they gave us money to promote democracy, which they do. It's really insane. I mean, the idea that there's some pass through here, or it's a conspiracy, or the USAID was funding us. We've never gone to USAID for funds. I don't think we have any government money, do we?
No.
And so, anyway, but I think that the people promoting the conspiracies know better, one would think. Anyway, Elon? I don't know, he's such an oddball.
I'm not sure they do. Wait, can I just say, because like they went after Ben Stiller, they clearly don't understand like that, like this idea that Politico got a gajillion dollars.
I don't agree with that. If they partly they don't understand, and partly they want to discredit everyone, and they don't care if it's true. I mean, I just
they don't care if it's true.
It's like Joe McCarthy with the communists. Sort of believes that there are a lot of communists in the government, but he also just decided, I'm going to release 200 whatever it was names of people without believing necessarily. It's in theory the idea is right. It's a deep state, and they think it's a deep state and it needs to be exposed. We're not going to worry too much about the details, but anyway, we're in agreement that one Elon picked up. He I guess, what is that called? Quote tweeted a couple of times. This is how the deep state works. This is why it's all corrupt. I think he mentioned this is Bill Kristol's on the take or something. You wrote an excellent piece rebutting it, and also rebutting it, but also criticizing Elon, obviously, and so subsequently pointing out that he, in fact, his company, I guess, has done work with or has received money from USAID, right?
So Starlink, yeah. Starlink. So like basically the same way that Politico Pro, people subscribe to Politico Pro because it's a product.
Right.
They utilize Starlink as a product, and that's just strictly USAID. Elon has billions of dollars of contracts with the federal government. Like, we don't get any government money. Elon gets billions of dollars of government money. And so it's just like everything with these guys, where every attack is a confession of sorts of their own stuff that they do. So like, but then they do sick Twitter mobs on people. And I know, God bless you, you don't read a comment to save yourself. You're just like,
right.
I don't know what.
Oblivious is the word you're looking for. No, but so the first one was a Twitter mob. Elon jumps on. Yes, it didn't really go much after that. You stifled it, I think, with your piece to some degree. Then the second time I did mention, it was a direct, I actually was criticizing Elon. Elon had advocated for bringing back that guy, that young 25-year-old who was proud of being a racist, who had been fired Friday, but then I think was brought back. But Elon was one of the first to say he shouldn't be fired. He should be brought back. So I tweeted something about how Elon's defending the white supremacist, bringing back a white supremacist, because guess what? He doesn't object to white supremacy, something like that. And that one, someone must have called to Elon's attention, or maybe he's dutifully following all of us very carefully. He should be, he should be a Bulwark Plus member. I'm going to say, incidentally, he should get the upgrade for all the Bulwark products, not just.
I was disappointed in how many people in the federal government were subscribing to Politico Pro and not to the Bulwark Plus.
That's a separate. Yeah, we should litigate that. Yeah, but I'm sure the Trump administration would be happy to pay for subscriptions to Bulwark to Bulwark Plus. So in this one, I did so to speak, criticize his tweet directly, and he went. I can't remember anymore how this one. I didn't know anything about for a few hours, and then some of our colleagues were putting it in Slack and stuff. But what is it? Elon responded by saying that, that I'm the argument against white. He was like trying to be witty, I'm the argument against white supremacy because I'm an idiot or something like that. And then one of his anti-Semitic followers said, I'm somewhat collapsing the sequence here, but not much. One of his anti-Semitic followers said he's not white, he's a Jew. And Elon,
he's Jewish, not white.
Yeah, he's Jewish, not white. And Elon sort of knew that wasn't a great place to be. He didn't actually want to, I would just, now I could put myself in his mind. He didn't want to actually, though, rebut his anti-Semitic followers, because he's got so many of them, and he toys with that himself. So he said something about how, oh no, Crystal's white, or Jews can be white, or Crystal's white. I can't remember. And
here, I'm going to read you. I'll just read you this exchange.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not explaining this quite as well.
It's okay.
Luckily, you've got the research in front of you.
This is easy. Yeah. This is easy to do. Okay, your original tweet was, Musk is bringing back the white supremacists because he doesn't actually think there's anything wrong with white supremacism. Okay, and his response to you was, you are a subtard.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that part.
I don't know what a subtard is.
They like using the word retard, honestly, because it's politically incorrect as they see it, and they love offending people and then getting, feeling like victims when people say, that you could not use that term. It would be kind of a nice thing not to use that term. But anyway, so I think subtard is some variant of retard, I guess. I don't know. No,
that for sure. I don't know what it was explicitly the sub means. Maybe that you're even
worse, probably.
Worse. Yeah. Okay. So then he says there's no greater evidence against white supremacy than an idiot like Crystal. And then this is when one of his, one of the people, because you would not believe, actually, maybe you would, the amount of anti-Semitism that comes your way as people debate this is pretty high, because Elon has cultivated an audience that is quite white supremacist friendly. And so when he said he's Jewish, not white, which, okay. And then Elon said, the idea that Jewish people are not white is ridiculous. Someone like Crystal is peak white, if anything. I'm actually, I tried to diagram that sentence a little bit, because you being peak white, what do you think that means?
God knows. God knows. And then he mentioned then he misspoke about melanin.
Well,
right?
This is my favorite part, is that there's like a second part of this chain where then he said, the second line in that tweet was, the dude barely has any melatonin. So you're peak white, you have no melatonin. And then somebody responded, it's melanin, bro. Melanin. And he said, I meant melanin. Shows I'm retarded too. This is the level of discourse we're being engaged with. I mean, so part of it, here's my question, Bill. This is a genuine question. It's the kind of thing you and I might debate, not on camera, but it's worth debating on camera, which is part of the trouble with what happens with Elon and Trump. It's a similar conundrum of, do you engage in something that is just rampant idiocy? Like, do you try? So I ran into this with my piece a little bit. Like, do I try to explain to morons who want to believe the conspiracy theory why their conspiracy theory is wrong? Like, do I use my precious time to do that? And even here, like, do you engage with a guy like Elon who has no idea what he's talking about, or do you ignore it? But like, the guy's almost the president. Like, he is dismantling the government at the moment while also, raising these attacks against you. And so it feels like it's too big to just let sail by. Like, you have to sort of correct some of this, or at least push back. But what do you think the right way to handle some of this is?
No, it's hard. I've probably erred on the side of not responding to a lot of stuff over the years. And it's been many, even decades at times, of being accused of kind of crazy things, because it is, how do you respond to to an idiotic or crazy accusation without, it's like, you're earnestly going to set it right? Are you going to earnestly talk about how white I am? It's so crazy and somewhat offensive. So why get into,
of course it's offensive,
into that? But on the end, if you just let it go, that's also a problem. And I do think exposing the degree, I've gotten much more interested in this in the last few months for obvious reasons, the degree to which the mob that they can, the Trump and Elon, in slightly different ways, but overlapping ways and coordinated, complementary ways, the mob they can unleash not just on X, but on social media, and obviously spills over into Fox and so forth and other forms of media. That's not a trivial part of their power. Look at all those Republican senators who caved and are voting to confirm Hegseth and Kash Patel and all that. It's something that has to be, it can't be just dismissed. And it does get to the broader point too of, they are clowns, but as Charlie Sykes used to say, they're clowns with flamethrowers. And as Jonathan Last modified that to, they're also, like in Jurassic Park, they've sort of learned to open the door, the door handles, which is a very
the velociraptors can work the handles.
And that's a very good formulation, I think. And that is also true. I've been reading up this weekend I think I sent you a couple of these pieces of, sort of what they're really doing in the government, what it means to have access to the Treasury information they're getting on all of our accounts, well, a lot of it's evidence, shutting down programs that are, in one day, in 1 week, and so forth. And I mean, it can't be dismissed. I think people in general have made the mistake of dismissing too much of this and not being alarmed enough by it. Now, maybe by now they are alarmed enough, but this is part of the overall effort, right? So it is worth calling to people's attention, I think.
It is worth calling people's attention. I think one of the things that's difficult about just this precise moment of what Elon's doing with the government is that we can't see it. And right. So we understand that they are telling people to leave, right? That they are in some cases they are barring entrances. In other cases, they're offering people, they're not buyouts, but they are basically, packaging, right. Giving people an exit to leave the government. And then they're also like rearranging things very fast. But in terms of the systems that they are overtaking, it is difficult for us. We can't see it. We'd have no idea. They're like, and so there's these little sub debates that no regular person could ever follow about, do they have read only access or do they have access to change things? Can they see people's? So Elon tweeted as part of some of this ongoing conversation, something like, we're not accessing people's private data. And it's a little bit like, oh, are we just supposed to take your word for that? Like, they have everybody's social security numbers. Elon has access to obviously everything on his own platform, people's DMs. And so as we turn the conversation to, I think, what we really want to talk about, which is how do we fight back? I want to point to the fact that, like, it's difficult to fight back against something where you're not really sure what they're doing or seeing. Apparently, you can't do a thumbs up without the little emojis coming up. And also, people are afraid. Like, I have lots of friends who have been in the government, were in the last administration, or who've been civil servants or at DOJ, whatever. And basically, the things that you hear from everybody is like, I don't know about saying something, and like the menace, right? The fear that people have, which I think is why our ability to demonstrate what pushback looks like, which is nothing more than we're just not going to let them sort of bully us into submission, is kind of important in this moment because people are afraid.
Yeah, just a couple of points. I think that's very well said. I mean, money has been cut off to a lot of people. And so that's worth really publicizing, whether it's AID recipients abroad or AID workers who have been flying home and with no notice. It's also worth noticing, just in terms of the cutoffs, how arbitrary and cruel they are intentionally. That is, there are ways to reorient government programs. There are ways to cut government. There are ways to redirect funds, and you do that with notice. You do that with 30 or 60 days. You do that by maybe at the end of the fiscal year saying, our priorities are going to be X, not Y. You do it by working with Congress. I mean, the degree of arbitrary exertion of power by the executive, but not even the executive, but by very few people working for Elon Musk, who was himself not elected to anything, is really startling and striking. And it in and of itself would be terrible, honestly, leaving aside all the attempt to get control of the systems of government. So there's sort of one thing is what they're doing to an awful lot of programs that Congress has authorized, that Congress has appropriated money for, that can be changed in certain ways. Some of them by executive action, a lot of them require congressional action. So that's already terrible. That's easier to get visibility into, and I think very much worth publicizing and attacking, both in terms of the merits of the program sometimes, but also in terms of the arbitrariness of what's happening. And incidentally, some of the courts have said, hey, you can't just do this. We need to have a hearing. There are contracts here. There's congressional laws that you can't just change on your own will. There's the Anti-Impoundment Act. And now, incidentally, they're attacking the courts. The courts have done very limited things, the TROs, they call temporary restraining orders, just saying, hey, wait a second, leave this in place. We'll have a hearing on this. We'll see if what you're doing is legal. People are challenging it as illegal and as a violation of either privacy acts, of legislative rights, or of constitutional rights. That's kind of what courts do. And again, this isn't like a national security emergency. Oh my God, courts can't slow us down. We're dealing with a war or a terrorist threat. This is a program that's been going on for however many years. It can be ended if they win in court. But they're attacking the courts. That's very striking, right? They're attacking Congress. They're attacking the courts. They really want full power. So that's one side of it. The other side, which I think you're right to focus on, though, and I've only really, I guess, focused on myself in the last few days, is the control over these internal mechanisms of government, payroll and information flow and all that, which is pretty ominous in its own right. That one, as you say, is a little harder to get a handle on, but again, the courts have said, well, wait, we need to look at what's happening in Treasury, and they're attacking that judge bitterly, right? I mean, he's literally holding something up for, 72 hours or something like that, so that we can sort of make sure that what they're doing is according to the law. There are a lot of laws that cover who has access to our data and so forth, quite rightly, I think. Do you think politically, so I think politically it's a little harder maybe to get people alerted. On the other hand, a friend of mine made this point to me just this morning. People don't really want Elon Musk to know about our personal data. Isn't that a pretty good issue? So it's just pivoting now to what might be good issues for the opposition to oppose on and to focus on. I've been sort of like, we should try a lot of things, who knows? But I feel like maybe saying that Elon Musk should not have access to our personal data is a pretty good issue. Do you think?
I do. I mean, I think there's a lot of things that people can do about Elon in general, not the least of which is the conflicts of interest that he brings to it, which is not that hard to understand. Like, of all the people he's accusing of taking money from the federal government, of all the deep state programs, nobody gets more money than Elon Musk. And so I do think that making that case is important. I think saying that nobody elected this guy is important, and that they are. Then here's the problem. I think the reason that Democrats are paralyzed, and they do seem pretty paralyzed to me, is because, decades of disdain for the federal government is catching up with them sort of right now, where there's a lot of people who are like, do I care about this? Like, I'm not that wild about foreign aid. I feel like a lot of money goes out the door. And you and I think it's worth saying, I think there's lots of stuff people could cut out of the federal government. I think there's plenty of bloat. I'm not anti trying to cut the amount that we spend, the amount of the debt that we owe. I think all of that stuff's a problem. And so I think under normal circumstances, if I felt like there were responsible people looking at the budgets in ways that were like audited and going through them, that would be one thing. To just pull the plug on a bunch of agencies and programs and throw them into, other agencies, and then to like bar the door from people coming in, and to have his team of young, in some cases very racist, little hotshot programmers just like in all the personal info. Yeah, I think we should be making a federal case out of Musk. And I do think that Trump, has linked himself to Musk now. And so driving down, like, people are polling now on Musk's approval rating. And I think getting that as low as possible is worthwhile.
Totally. And I would just add one point. I mean, in normal circumstances, let's just call, but also with your constitutional circumstances, the way it's supposed to happen, there's this thing called Congress. You know what? OMB submits a budget. If OMB thinks AID should be at zero, if OMB thinks, if the Trump White House thinks AID should be at 10 million instead of 30 million or whatever it is, they can submit a budget with that. And guess what? The Republicans control Congress. If they all believe this, they can vote for this budget and it will become law of the land. No judge is going to stop Congress from changing the appropriations levels or changing the authorizing legislation, which targets the use of funds for these different agencies. There's not even a pretense of an attempt to do this. Back in Nixon's day, at least they submitted budgets, I believe, in cases that tried to do this. I was at the Education Department. We tried to cut its size by a third under Reagan. Congress rejected the budget. It didn't really occur to me that, I guess we just get to do it on our own then, right? I think the degree of just illegality and unconstitutional character needs to be focused on. But I agree with you. I've talked to people who I think are pretty intelligent and, some fellow ex-conservative types who still have some conservative views. And it's like, but there is bloat there in AID. First of all, I haven't seen the studies they're relying on. Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. Usually you review the agency, you decide this part is foolish. This part for, AIDS programs in Indonesia or Africa is good and, has had bipartisan support for a heck of a long time. And let's leave that part and get rid of this part. And that's what the budget shows. Nothing, even a pretense of that kind of order. And people go, you're just saying it should work the way Washington works. No, I'm saying it should work the way there's accountability and there's some reflection and debate about what's happening. And there's been none of that, of course. And so I think, the arbitrariness, the capriciousness is very, I think people might understand that. They wouldn't want their lives to be governed that way. They might work in a corporation or a school system or a hospital where there are things that are money that's being spent on stupid things and money that's being spent foolishly and money that's being spent counterproductively. And they would wish there to be a review process that goes through the review and consults with whoever the governing board is or whatever, and changes
instead
the
of just freezing their assets
or removing or taking away, right, or firing them with 1 week's notice because some 25-year-old has decided that this part of the hospital doesn't work well and you're not necessary as a nurse, because they've got some studies showing that nurses, this place would work fine with 3 nurses instead of 4. I don't know. They don't even have a study though. I guess that's how bad it is, right? They don't have a study of anything. This is entirely based on, I don't know what, even just some Heritage Foundation stuff, and then mostly them just thinking about things they don't like, So it's really bad, I guess, and very alarming. And if they get away with it, then we're just in a whole new world. And then we are just in a system where the next people come in and they just remove the stuff they don't like. And I don't know. It's
Well, let's go back to something that you said that I think is really worth highlighting, which is that there's the other 2 co-equal branches of government. Why do I keep getting
They love you here on Substack. You start to talk, it's balloons, it's the thumbs up, it's whatever. Me, no one cares. I'm just talking. That's okay. Go right ahead. Let's see what happens next.
It's Congress. I'm going to have to control my hands. Yeah. It's Congress and it's the judicial branch, right? And so they are trying to basically, hamstring both. But to your point about Congress, I was thinking about this the other day, and I feel like I think we skip over it because it's so self-evident to us, but I'm not sure this isn't worth highlighting in a much bigger way. Republicans have a budget coming up, right? Like if they want to cut these things, right, have this budget discussion. Yeah, you control Congress. I suspect they're all happy to have it done this way, because this way, all kinds of stuff can happen without them having to take any responsibility for it. Because cutting things, just like spending on things, is always like a little bit unpopular, like whichever way, because people don't quite understand it. And so, but if Republicans should do their jobs, and I think we should push them harder on this, like pass a budget to cut these things. Don't do it in a way that's unlawful and unconstitutional with people that weren't elected. Do it, you guys. That's your job. That's one piece. The second piece is the judges, which is now they are going to attack and like not just, and when we say they, it's not just Elon Musk, it's not just Big Balls 27. It's the Vice President of the United States. Right. The Vice President of the United States is right now attacking judges, saying that because they are setting up a scenario to say that the courts are illegitimate in trying to rein them in so that they have a pretext for ignoring rulings they don't like. That's the end. Like when we hit the point where Trump and Elon and these guys just start ignoring court rulings, and there are members of Congress already agitating for this, or big Twitter accounts or whatever. Because what's the difference now in our country? And if we hit the point where the courts say you cannot do this or you have to have a temporary restraining order, and they do it anyway, then you get to the point of like, who's going to enforce the court order? Where are we? Can you tell me where we are?
No, that's scary. I mean, just on the Congress point, one thing that might help a little, so I guess the slight glimmers of light might be these programs do have constituencies. That's one reason why they've been so hard to cut over the years, and why conservatives have often complained about how hard it is to cut them. And they are now calling their members of Congress. I gather Lisa Murkowski said something like the phones are ringing off the hook in Alaska, where we have people coming back who they're coming back from AID projects, or they have relatives who are on them or whatever, or a million other projects that are being cut. And they want to know, hey, you're a senator from here. Have you done anything to stop this? Did you vote for this legislation? It's like, no one asked me. I'm just a ranking member on some appropriations committee. I mean, that is where I think Congress wants to duck responsibility, but it might not be that easy for them. And we should make it harder for them, honestly, and let them try to get them to step up. God knows that's hard. The assault on the judges is amazing. Vance, who should know better, went to Yale Law School. And Vance, incidentally, has been a major proponent, and he's within his rights on this side, to argue for the rights of Christian bakers who were being persecuted by the government of Colorado for not wanting to make certain cakes, or for anti-abortion protesters whom they argued the Biden Justice Department was being insufficiently solicitous of their free speech rights outside of abortion clinics and so forth. Vance is for the courts defending rights when they're on his side. But if but this tweet he has is so disingenuous. This is a legitimate use of executive power. Well, that's exactly what's at question, and that's why it's litigated. And the government has a lot of assets when they go into these litigations. They have the Justice Department of the United States, run by Trump allies. They can get all kinds of friendly outside groups to come in on their side. It's not like they're overwhelmed by some public interest liberal law firm or people who've gotten together in a hurry to try to defend the rights of some of these government workers or recipients of grants, or just people in the Treasury Department who are saying, wait a second, I don't think you're really entitled to see this. You don't have a security clearance yet. Shut up, you're fired, So anyway, yes, the degree to which they are all in on an assault on the basic rule of law and the basic structure of our constitutional order is really pretty amazing. What are we, 3 weeks into this administration?
Yes, it's happening fast. And this brings me to, I know we said we'd only do a half an hour, but I do want to just talk briefly about, I know you're getting this question a lot. I'm getting this question a lot. What can we do, right? What can we do about it? And I do have a few thoughts, some quick ones. The first one is around fear. And one is be less afraid. Just don't let them stop you. I am watching a lot of people be like there's all these former employees of the government who know what's happening, know why this is wrong. They're afraid to speak out. Speak out. Go tell your story. Tell people what's happening, because as I mentioned before, one of the big problems that's happening is we can't really get a lens inside these agencies to figure out what is happening and why. And one of the best people to sort of walk us through that is people who've been part of these agencies in the past and understand what is happening, which parts are legitimate and make sense versus which parts are wrong and unconstitutional and unlawful, or just dangerous and scary. And people need to go talk about this. So don't be afraid. And I think that if you are just a regular person and you're like, boy, how can I help? I think encouraging people to speak out and defending people who is an important part of your task, because everyone wants to feel like they kind of have people having their backs, right? It's when people feel alone that they feel really scared. So that's the not being scared is one piece. The other piece is, and this sort of goes more for Democrats or for people who are maybe run these NGOs or other places that are also, I think there's a lot of people right now doing what should my talking points be? What are the 3 things? What's the best message? And you guys will paralyze yourselves talking to each other about this. Just go say something. Just go talk. Tim and I have been having a little bit of an argument over on Next Level, because he's go swing at sort of every pitch and fight over, if you're mad about trans things, go fight about that. And I've been a little I think people should pick. I think people can't swing at absolutely everything. And I think that they should also not swing at things that basically where I feel like they've lost a bit of the cultural fight. I feel like going and doubling down on places that are, unpopular, and part of the reasons that Democrats are unpopular is not the best. And so I don't think that Democrats should. I do think people should be self-aware or cognizant of the fact that the federal government and its spending is maybe kind of broadly unpopular. And so you got to go into your messaging with a little bit of awareness about that to say, for example, hey guys, I think we could cut bloat out of some of the government, some of these agencies, but this is not the way to do it. They can't just have access to the information. They can't just take this right away from Congress. And go just talk about that. If you're a member of Congress, get in front of a camera. And I think people need to call more press conferences, demand more information. Democrats, you've got tools at your disposal. Use them. Hold up the nominees. I think that what I'm hearing from voters in the focus groups on the Dem side is sort of a desperation for someone to push back. And the idea that there's just nothing we can do is untrue. You just need people to kind of come together and do it. You need there to be a little bit of safety in numbers, people working, but don't be activists. Don't conduct a sit-in. Explain to the American people why what's happening is wrong.
And different people could do different things. Members of Congress should probably focus on actually doing stuff in Congress and introducing legislation that highlights the right way to do it as opposed to the wrong way to do it, or highlights their agenda as opposed to the Trump agenda. Activists on the outside can highlight individuals who are being hurt by these cuts and unfairly treated, and people who are flying back from working hard at as I said, an AIDS mission in Africa and are now home staying in someone's basement because they were pulled out back without a single from a worthwhile and valuable program authorized and appropriated by the U.S. Congress and by previous administrations, including the Trump administration the first time. And, that this is terrible treatment and very stupid and destructive to U.S. interests and so forth. So there's that whole side of things I agree with. I'm a little more friendlier to a little more than. Well, this way. There are issues that might generally be unpopular issues, the border or immigration, even if you want, or transgender rights. But the way in which the Trump administration is going after particular aspects of those issues could themselves be unpopular. So I think people are being too broad in saying, for example, in South, they're trying to remove temporary protected status from 400,000, I think it is, Venezuelans, 500,000, who came here legally, asked for the status, fleeing the Maduro regime, a terrible sort of socialist communist dictatorship, fleeing there, came here, asked for this status, were granted it by the administration, have paid $545, I think it is, to get their work permits, are working, have a lower crime rate than average Americans, many of them in Florida. That may not be a huge issue nationally, but in South Florida, that is an issue where you can begin to get some Republican members of Congress to say, wait a second, I'm for getting tough on the border. I'm not for deporting people who are illegally, who've done they did exactly what they're supposed to do. They didn't sneak in. The reason we know who they are is because they showed up and said, I'm from Venezuela. That regime's horrible. You've decided that the people coming from there should have temporary protected status. I would like that. We're keeping track of those people. They're paying their taxes. We know their crime rates. They're low, etc. I'd say the same on transgender rights. Even the New York Times actually has a pretty good editorial today. Medical care for minors, sports teams is one issue. Really trying to deny these people the right to exist, basically, as who they are in America, is really grotesque. And so I'm also somewhat, So I'm somewhat.
No. I'm with you on this. This is exactly what I mean about sort of like messaging, is to say, listen, you say the Republicans say we should secure the border, but not like that should be the Democrats' messaging. Right. The Democrats should be like, I'm all for securing the border, but the idea that you're going to go deport people who did everything the correct way, did it exactly as we asked them to. This should be it for USAID. There is bloat, and we should be taking a systematic approach to cutting that, but just we are cutting off people in the middle of medical trials that were funded by USAID who are going to die immediately because we have just indiscriminately, thoughtlessly pulled the plug on that. The idea of transgender sports, and those are complicated issues, but that is not what we're talking about here. We're talking about them. This just like attack on human beings. The idea that adults don't have the right to decide who they want to be. Adults have that right. We want to stay out of people's lives in that way. That's between those adults and their doctors. Like, get on the footing of the place where the majority is with you. Don't die on niche places where people aren't with you.
And I think, there's plenty of places where the majority is with them, because for all the talk of Trump's more popular, he's like the poll to this morning, CBS, he's at 53%. In other polls, he's at 47%. Basically, he's where he was on election day, within 2 or 3%. Musk is less popular than Trump. So he's not going to, tens of millions of Americans aren't going to change their view overnight. But I do think it's very important 6 months from now that Trump be, let's say, at 44%, not at 56%, if you want to just sort of think of it that way. And that's nicking away can do that, I think. And so people should, enter the fight and not be dispirited, though it's a alarming time, no question. I guess we should end on something a little lighter.
Lighter or more positive, which is just to your point. I did a focus group about from people who had been Dem voters who voted for Trump, right? They've passed on him a couple times, but they voted for him this time. And I think this is a real kind of group of people. We know it is because there's a lot of movement, especially even in non-swing states. Those people are not committed Trumpists. And like the idea, they were dissatisfied maybe with Joe Biden, with maybe some Dems in general, but also just with like costs of things. Maybe they're unhappy with immigration, but mostly it was about costs in the economy and them feeling like Joe Biden, like, what are we doing here? And so those people can be won back. Number one, they're not MAGA, right? They're just, and like, there's a lot of those people. Like the idea that voters are all one thing. Like, does Trump and Elon, do they have committed Pepe the Frog, people who are going to go to the bat for them? They do. That's not like the bulk of majority voters or Trump voters. So I think people shouldn't get so dispirited. When they see Trump at 53%, that should just be an invitation to be like, great, how do we get him and I think that CBS poll has been routinely sort of more sort of Trump Republican friendly, but like, but when I listen to voters in the focus groups too, they're excited by the action, right? They're like, oh, Trump is doing something. They're this is something that's happening in our culture where people don't want to wait for Congress, right? They're impatient. They want things to happen faster. So the idea that Trump looks like he is doing something, they see that as a good sign. 6 months from now, when the trickle down effects of this doing something creates negative personal consequences in their lives, they might not feel that way. And so if we believe, I think as we do, that a bunch of these decisions are bad decisions and will have adverse and negative impacts on people, then we should believe that over time, people will feel those things and become less accommodating of Trump, which is, I believe, like a better than 50% prospect.
No, that I couldn't agree more. And look, people have voted for Trump once, twice, 3 times. They're not going to simply walk away from him right away. They're going to give him a little benefit of the doubt. I think this is where also to a footnote to your very well said point, the real effects will matter a lot. Highlighting those real effects matters a lot. Highlighting sympathetic cases matters a lot. That's pretty standard, communications advice, I think. But also Musk. I mean, they didn't vote for Musk. It wasn't really advertised in the campaign that there was going to be this whole separate agenda, if you will, which isn't really Trump's agenda exactly. I mean, some of it overlaps, of course, but what we're seeing now, and I think people can be pretty alarmed by that. And Musk's numbers are weaker than Trump, and who elected him, and he's a weirdo. I mean, Trump's a weirdo. Trump's odd in his own way, but he's a successful demagogue. And anyway, people are used to him. It's been 10 years. They voted for him, as I say, once, twice, 3 times, 70 million Americans. I mean, it's just harder to discredit him right away. Whereas Musk, I think, is the easier target at this point, and the totally legitimate target. And incidentally, yes. Is he running the government? I mean, he does seem to be running an awful lot of it. And people who were and Steve Bannon, who's been a very loyal Trump guy for 10 years, thinks Musk is doing way too much and be given too much latitude. So you can get some intra-Trump world fighting, which never hurts, right? So someone said to me, how can you be, siding with Steve Bannon? I didn't really mean to be siding with Steve Bannon. I'm just criticizing Elon Musk. It's not my fault that Bannon also does so, but it's a good thing, actually. It's helpful if Bannon is telling his loyal followers, you can't really trust Musk. He's got his own agenda. Well, A, that may be true, and B, good to have some rifts there in the authoritarian movement, because this is the, I guess, final point. Yeah, as we said at the very beginning, social media and stuff, it is a powerful movement. I mean, we can't kid ourselves anymore that this is a fringy little thing, a weirdo thing, right? And so it needs to be taken on in a serious way.
Yeah, well,
but we will.
Yeah, we'll, and we will.
And we are, and we will, and many are. I think others are, actually. I've been struck in just other, conversations I've had in the last 4 or 5 days. People are now awake, alarmed. The members of Congress. I think Democrats, the official Democratic Party, might be a little slower. But on that too, look, Chuck Schumer's just not going to be a good leader of popular activist communicate stuff. He should go run the Senate. He should not go to rallies and look like an idiot waving his arms up and down when he's screaming, we're going to resist. Let other people do that. There are plenty of let young leaders emerge, some of them in elective office, some of them not in elective office. And so, or not so young, it doesn't matter that much, but let new leaders emerge. So I think is now beginning to happen. It's just people were a little taken by surprise for those first 2 or 3 weeks, but we got, in that respect, the shock and awe. They've done most of the shocking and most of the awing, right? And now it's getting a little bit like real consequences. And is this really the way we want things to run? And take a look at Elon Musk. Do you want all these people, 24-year-olds in the government? So I am actually I'm both very alarmed and a little more upbeat than I was a week ago.
Yeah. And I'll leave you just with a few other last minute things is like, go check and see if there's local races anywhere near you. Because the number one way to demonstrate a backlash to this is to win local off-year elections where they happen. And so there's going to be elections in 2025. There's going to be a big one in Wisconsin, state Supreme Court race coming up. There's, there's going to be a gubernatorial election in Virginia that's going to be really important and closely watched this year. There's still electoral work and organizing that can be done. And frankly, doing it in the off years demonstrates it pays bigger dividends than in the years when everybody's paying attention.
And in the off years when people decide to run. And one of the successes of 2018 was an awful lot of candidates people say were recruited, but a lot of times they recruited themselves. To mention
Yeah.
two who are running this year for governor, Abigail Spanberger in Virginia and Mikey Sherrill in New Jersey. They
Right.
were, in Mikey Sherrill's case, a career military, and Abigail's case, career CIA, who were so appalled by what Trump was doing, they decided to run for office. And they did well, and they won, and hopefully they're going to win for governor this year. But I'd say run for office, or encourage others to run for office, or encourage others to run for office. I think getting a whole fresh crop of candidates who are genuinely motivated by concern for the country, who's not like, oh, this is my next step up because I've been in the state legislature, and I don't mean to. Some of those people are good, but I've been in the city council and the state legislature, and this is my next rung on the ladder. Getting some fresh blood in there in electoral politics would be a good thing. So, if we can encourage people watching this to do that, I do so. And Sarah, I think that's a good note to end on. I was there,
Yeah,
and we went over
that's
a little.
positive.
Yeah, it's positive. It's true. It's true. It's alarming, but there are things that it could be encouraging. So, Sarah, thank you for joining me on this first Sunday Bulwark Live Substack. I don't know what we call it, event, and we'll be back. We'll be back next Sunday. Sarah, see you in the office tomorrow.
Bye, guys.